What's going on, guys? So I'm going to talk about potentially the negative aspect of understanding, or too much mercy, in a sense. And I know that sounds kind of harsh, but I hope I'll be able to articulate what I mean. So let me first off, the reason I'm talking about this, okay, is on the Kabbalistic tree of life, right? I talk about Saturn all the time, and on some illustrations of the tree of life, Binah, B-I-N-A-H, is always Saturn. It's black, it's the number 3, and sometimes you'll see understanding. It's the Sephiroth of understanding, which is like an attribute. Each Sephiroth has different attributes. I think about Saturn and all of its negative connotations, and I'm sure it has some utility or something, but I tried to think about how understanding could be bad. Like, why would it be tied into Saturn? Binah is intuitive understanding or contemplation. It is likened to a palace of mirrors, which is the palace of mirrors thing is something I'm gonna do in another video. I'm trying to stay on topic with the understanding aspect. Down here it also says Binah is associated with the feminine. The Bahir states, "For you shall call understanding a mother." So this isn't even a new topic. If you go to my video that it's titled something crazy like "Your Mom Wants You Dead," Saturn, like the evil mother archetype. It's an archetype I've covered, which is basically an idea, and I mean it's literally, sometimes it has to do with moms literally, but it goes beyond just moms, and it's just like loving someone to death. And what I mean by that is you're so accommodating and so forgiving that you actually hinder and impair their growth, like their character development, their ability to be independent and things like that. And obviously that is one of the downsides of too much understanding that I'm talking about. I have this friend who he worked in a rehab or something like that. And a lot of the times, he's just like this a lot. A lot of the times, he would tell me these insane stories of what people had done and the condition that they would arrive in. Or just even outside of that too, just stories about people we know and things, and he'd be like, "Yeah, but I understand it." Sometimes I don't think that's a virtue, because it's "Yeah, but I understand it." It's almost like a pullback, and it's almost like an inability to judge the situation or the action as something that should be even judged as wrong. It's something that we should look at it and be like, "Okay, sure, I understand. You can be forgiven, but now it's time to overcome it. Now it's time to turn from it." And sometimes when you understand it too much, you're almost like giving people a free pass, or you're almost like I said, it's like the mom, you're almost like enabling or facilitating that very condition that they're in by being unable to judge it properly. Even on the Kabbalistic tree of life, there's a pillar of mercy, which I'm pretty sure Binah is at the top of the pillar of mercy. I could be wrong about that. And then there's a pillar of severity, which is, you could exchange that with judgment. And, right, like I said, I think sometimes when you're overly understanding, you're actually not doing someone a favor. Also, another point I want to make about that, I know this sounds harsh, and I'm not even saying it doesn't have its utility, because everyone's going to fall short of the ideal of God, and everyone's a sinner, right? We all fall short of the glory of God, and all that means is you're never going to be on point 100% of the time with anything that you do. So mercy and forgiveness and understanding is necessary. But what I'm talking, and maybe I'll do a video on that too, but the point is, most people, especially nowadays with the New Age thinking, they completely overlook this component to it. And it's kind of linked to left-wing politics in a way, in some sense, because it's like, oh, the victim, they're a victim. Like, they identify certain groups of people as, I'm not trying to make it political again, but I'm just trying to show you how it manifests in our world in different ways. A group of people that's been identified as a victim group basically gets held to a different standard of right and wrong, and that's the problem. You're actually not doing them a favor. It's actually almost insulting in a way to do that. This could easily teeter into, instead of why is understanding, can understanding be bad, it could almost teeter into the utility of judgment. And it's like, you know, to change, you have to identify a problem in the first place, and you can't identify it unless you're capable of judging. Sure, your judgment should be tapered with, you should be self-aware, you should be, you know, informed about your judgments, you should be competent about your judgments, but and sometimes, and even it goes internally. Like when people say don't judge, like they think you're just like, oh, like look at that dumb person. It's like, no, even it can even go to the internal level. It's like, there's certain things about yourself that you should change. How would you know what you should change if you can't judge them? It's really that simple. Another thing I wanted to say, I don't know if I already said this, but I wanted to say, it isn't solution-based thinking to be overly understanding. I watched this interview one time of Tucker Carlson and Gavin McInnes, of all people. And it's funny because you shall call understanding a mother, and it's associated with the feminine, and that's typically how masculine and feminine roles play. Women tend to be on the left pillar, which is the mercy pillar, and men tend to be on the severity pillar. Just, it almost seems like we have a natural inclination to be like that, which is why you kind of need a two-parent household. They kind of balance it out. But they were saying, Gavin McInnes and Tucker Carlson, they were saying Tucker was actually admitting sometimes when his wife, I'm not even saying I endorse these people 100%, but it's relevant to this topic, and he's saying, you know, my wife will tell me a problem. She doesn't want to hear, here's 5 things you need to do to solve the problem. She wants to just be listened to and empathized with and just be understood that she's really suffering. Gavin cracked some kind of joke about that, but and it's true, and I understand like the point of that, especially with certain problems like somebody's death or something you don't really have a solution for. You know, like there is, even with somebody's death, there's probably certain things you could do to like combat the feeling of anguish and like despair that might come along with that. There's probably things you could do to help it, and there's probably things you could do to make it worse. So it's not completely irrelevant to think with a solution about that, but ultimately you're not going to be able to bring someone back to life. But when it comes to, you know, self-inflicted suffering, which is I think most of our which I think is the majority of our suffering, you know, there's solutions that people can tell you, and that requires judgment. And when you're overly merciful, like, oh, it's okay, I understand, you're not offering the path out. You're not offering the way out. You're not, that's what I meant by it's facilitating or even enables bad behavior sometimes. Like, I'll tell you personally from my childhood, understanding the crazy stories of the drug addicts, it's like I have a history with drugs too, and sure, I can understand, I guess, but at the end of the day, it's still an insane story, and it's still an insane thing to think and do, and ultimately at the end of the day, my final thing is, okay, how do we overcome this? How do we solve the problem? That's really what you're left with at the end of the day. It's like, we can sit and understand and empathize as much as we want, but it's like, how do we move forward? Why I think it's not necessarily solution-based thinking to have that as like a default mode. And I just wanted to, like, if you want more about it, it makes sense that it's the mother and everything, and I talk about this a lot more in my, you know, evil mom archetype, whatever that video is called. And okay, so here's an example of what I'm talking about. I don't have too many visuals for this. It's just mostly me talking, and I want this video to be pretty short because it's kind of me reiterating a lot of stuff. This was circulating around the internet for a little bit. It's a OkCupid ad, which is a dating thing. It's like Tinder, right? And they had all these like insane ads, right? And it's one of them is, it's okay to have strong convictions and abandon them for the night. And you see how that message almost encourages you to abandon, like, let's say you have a goal, like, I want to get fit, but then, and that you feel that strong conviction, but for the night you go and drink and you screw up your gym for the next day. It's almost like you're encouraging people, like, the message should be, you should be putting out a message of like sticking to the path and like, okay, if you fall off the horse, get right back on. You shouldn't really, like, I don't know how else to say, you're almost encouraging. And this attitude is very pervasive amongst young people now. It's like this is seen as like enlightenment, to be just like super like an enabler and just like unable to judge properly and things like that. And it's not about like condemning people and like you can't be redeemed. It's just like what are you telling them to be like? It's okay that's an insane ad. And in the context of a dating app, they're telling you to like, I don't know, in the context of a dating app, they're almost telling you to go sleep around for the night, is how I take that. But it goes beyond that, just as a general principle. Like, it's okay to like quit and give up for like, yeah, it is, but like, you shouldn't be really saying that. You should say, the sign should say like, you know, hang in there, like, let's stick to the course, remember why you're doing it, things like that. Things that encourage you to stay the path, not things to take a break or quit or abandon. That's pretty insane to say. It's okay to, like, to me, I don't look at that and think of it like a good thing. It's almost like, I understand that it's trying to alleviate guilt, and sometimes that's important to move forward. Like, if you feel like you've wasted a lot of time, if you're just beating yourself up about something and that's kind of stagnating you from moving forward, I understand the utility of like alleviating guilt. But at the same time, you should feel shame and guilt when you fall short of the ideal, because that's an emotional indicator that you are falling short of the ideal. So to totally rid yourself of shame or guilt or regret in a way, I don't know if that's good or useful. In the same way that beating yourself up about it isn't really useful. There's like the opposite end of that. Like I said, I don't think it's encouraging the right things out of us. I think it speaks to our weaknesses instead of to our strength. I think it speaks to our, you know, it doesn't speak to our potential, and I guess that's what I'm getting at. If you're overly understanding, you don't have the proper like standards for people. And if you don't hold people to a standard, it's actually it's almost like it has no value. I don't know if that makes sense. It's kind of like when you use the word love, that love is a standard. It might not be totally objective, but it's not totally subjective either. We all have, if you ask a million people what love means to them, you'd probably be able to cultivate a general idea of it. Like, we could probably say, just to be super easy about it, okay, if you love someone, you don't like beat them up. You don't beat up your wife, right? That's probably not someone who loves their wife if they beat their wife, right? So that's one, almost, I would say, arguably objective rule that we can apply to the word love, which is to make it a standard. I don't really know what to say about this, but I'm going to go off my memory. This is from a scene from My Hero Academia. It's an anime show. I really like this show. It's been a while since I've watched it, but this scene is really good for a number of reasons. But there's one particular piece of dialogue that I want to bring up in the context of this video. And I won't even really be able to explain what it means. I'm just kind of throwing it out there for you guys. But it's interesting. To me, it connects. Maybe I'm reaching, but to me, it connects. So, before I get to that piece of dialogue, let me just I could do a whole video on just this conversation. And you know, it's about a boy who thinks he wants to become a hero, and he's not sure if he can, because in this world everyone has powers, he doesn't have a power. How he had the courage to run into a situation where everyone was frozen, and it inspired him to get involved, which this guy's All Might. The other guy, the kid, his name is Deku. I haven't even shown him yet, so that's All Might. The kid's name is Deku. And, you know, him running in inspired him, so that's a thing. Like, the courage is kind of contagious. This is not pertaining to the video, what the topic of this video, but he said all heroes, they have one thing in common. Their bodies move almost as if on their own, like before they even had a chance to think. I think that's interesting, because, like, most people would have the opposite thing. And, you know, Naruto said the same thing in that show. He said, when I see you suffering, my body, like I acted on my own, like I didn't even think about it. And that's interesting because to me that's almost like the ideals live so strongly and innately in that person's heart that it's just like instinct. Like them being good is literally it's literally a no-brainer. It's instinct. I think that's interesting. But I could do a whole video on just this scene. It's a really cool scene. But in particular, relating to this video, Deku, this boy, he's remembering apart from the past when he found out that he has no powers, right? And he's saying, "You never told me, Mom, the words that I needed to hear back then," right? So he's remembering a scene, like a flashback from his childhood. So right here, he's remembering his mom was saying, "I'm sorry, Deku, like, you know, you won't be able to become a hero." Basically, she was being understanding, you see? And she was empathizing with him. And Deku goes on, and I'm not even saying his mom's not a bad person and not a bad character, so don't get it twisted. Sometimes people can be well-meaning. I'm not even saying she's like this, because she's a good mom character in the show, because she's very encouraging as soon as things as soon as he believes, he kind of spreads the belief to her and everything. But sometimes people can be well-meaning and still have detrimental effects to you. Sometimes your friend or your mom or whoever might be overly caring for you, and they might mean well. Who knows what like subconscious motivations might be underneath that, but they might mean well. But ultimately, if the effect is still a negative one on you, it's almost irrelevant. It's not entirely irrelevant, but it's almost irrelevant. The point is, she's saying, "I'm sorry, you know, this is reality. You're not going to be able to be like All Might, your ideal, your hero," which is the guy who's talking to him in the present. He said, "You never told me, Mom, the words that I needed to hear." And then what does All Might say? He says, "Young man, you too can become a hero." So he's saying, you know, he didn't want to be understood. He wanted to be told that it's possible, that the ideal is actually reachable, that he has potential and it's possible for him to reach it. He didn't want to be empathized with. I guess in a way, maybe All Might's empathizing him right now. I don't know if this really connects to what I'm talking about before, but to me it does in a way, even if I haven't really thought about how to explain it properly. It's just something that came to my mind when I was thinking about this. It's like, yeah, that seems to connect. Especially, you know, you shall call understanding a mother. It's literally his mom. Beyond that, though, it's just like she's understanding him, but like I would recommend you go watch this up. If you just look up, My Hero Academia, You Can Become a Hero. This scene is really cool. This entire show is pretty cool. It's got a weird fan base, but the show is good. And I'm all about the hero stuff. I really, you know, and this show tackles that. And it could be corny, but I think it's cool. But anyways, like I said, he just wanted to be told he could become a hero. He didn't want to be understood. So, I don't know. I hope this makes sense, guys. That's really all I have to say. I'm sure I'll remember things that I wanted to add to it. So let me know what you guys think. Thank you for watching.